What's up everyone, welcome back to Workshop Rebuild. This is my channel where I take apart, clean and reassemble machines to make them fully functional again. Right behind me here I have once again the Bolens HT20 in my shop. Most of you guys will remember this machine from a previous rebuild series I did back in November. The plan for today is working on the front blade over there on the right, and then later on I'll be working on the rear attachment, which is a rototiller. So without further ado, let's get to the video. As you guys can see, I pushed the Bolens out of the way in front of me, and I brought in the rototiller, and over here on the bench I have the plow or the snow blade. Looking at the snow blade right here, there was something that caught my eye, and I had to make a decision on what I'm going to do about it. And as you guys can see right here, the bolt holes for the cutting edge are still visible over here on this end. And if we take the table as a reference, on this side we have about a ½ inch gap, and as I go along down to the other side, that's the last hole right there, and then there are 2 or 3 more missing, but the gap gets drastically bigger to the end of that side. So the issue here was that on these bolts right here and over there on those 2 sides were these height adjusters right here, and as you guys can see, that bolts on just like that, but there should be a 90-degree bend to that, and this right here is actually your height adjuster, so you can adjust this to the level that you'd like to plow something. But as you guys can see, it broke off right here, right at the bend, or they wore it down to the very bottom. Maybe they were using oops, maybe the previous owner was using this on concrete or whatever, and it just wore out. And same with the other side right here, it just totally wore it out, and actually even more, as you guys can see right there. So this one was on the other side right over here, and it just over time, without looking at the blade, just dug into the cutting edge, disintegrated that, and then just ate away the back end as well. So the plan on this blade right here was to buy flat stock right here. I believe this is 3/16 thick, and the blade itself is 54 inches from end to end, and I went a little bit longer. I went 54.5 from end to end, so it's going to be sticking out a little bit on the side, so you have a little bit more cutting edge on the bottom. And then these 2 little plates on the top right here, these 2 right here, I will be fabricating them to make these brackets right here, which go on these 2 bolts, and we can use that as our height adjuster. Then I will be bending them 90 degree on one spot and then bending them a little bit up on the other, that they have a nice riding surface. But for the long piece of metal right here, that I will be drilling so that it can line up with these bolt holes right here, which are 5 of them. And then towards the end, I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do over here, but that will be another issue. After that, I'm going to be sanding everything down, making sure it's intact and everything is straight, especially here where the previous owner did some repairs themselves, but I'll make sure that's all good. And then I can give this a coat of paint, and that'll be perfect. Moving on to the rototiller over here. Everything looks like it's in good condition. Everything is fairly straight. I do see the sidewalls right here. They have a little outwards bow to them. So I'm going to be straightening that on that side. And this side over here is actually very good, so I don't have to really touch anything. But I will be taking this sheet metal off, sanding it down and giving it a coat of paint the same color as the blade over there. After that, I'm going to come over here on the gearbox, and I'm going to have to just clean it up. I'm going to have to see if that gasket there along the seam of both housings is sealed or not. If not, I'm going to have to split it and put new gasket material there. And I have already a new seal for this shaft right here. After everything is cleaned up and the tines look good as well, then I can give everything here a coat of paint. But for in the meantime, let's get to work. So I just took the second rod out, and as you guys can probably see down the line right there, it is pretty bent. But I'm going to straighten that out later on and yeah, clean these up right here, clean the bolts up. But let me get to the other stuff and take off all this panel, and then we can look at the tines and the gearbox up front. I just took off all the panels and the guards around the rototiller mechanism, and I'll give you a close-up on how that looks like. Right over there I have the panels and the guard that are laying on the ground, and now the rototiller itself is exposed. We have the gearbox going over to this drive shaft right here where the tines are mounted to, and right here we have a little support bracket for the main panels right there, so that holds that in place. But this is how it looks like. And what I will be doing is taking off that main bracket right there so I can access more of the bolts right here. I'm going to have to check that seal right there and the one on that side and make sure those aren't leaking. And the one up front, I do have a replacement for that, so I will be changing that here soon. These brackets up front right here and right here will be coming off. And so let's get to the work. Is taking out the seal from the main shaft right here, and that seal has a function to keep the oil within the gearbox and not splash oil out onto the drive shaft. So for that, I have a little trick right here. I use a wooden screw, something that's about 1 inch long, and I'm just going to poke it through, and I'm going to take my impact tool and I'm going to put it on, and then I'm going to drive it in, probably on the top end right here, and make sure I'm going to puncture it first, and then I'm going to push it through. But as I push it through, I know that there's a bearing behind this seal that's holding this drive shaft in place, so I don't want to drive it the full 1 inch in, or else I'm going to touch that bearing, which I do not want to do. So I just want to get the front tip in, maybe like 3/16, a 1/4 inch maximum, into that seal. And then I'm going to be using a pry bar and a hammer to just pull on this screw head after it's inside the seal, because I will be replacing this seal eventually. To puncture it, you can also use a hammer just to get the tip started, and then drive it in. Just like that. Now I'm going to take off the bit. And I'm going to use a pry bar right here. and then the hammer to tap on that. And just like that, I'm going to give you guys a close-up right here. As you guys can see right here, the seal is still on the bolt right here. And now I can release the rest of the oil since it's on an angle. But that's exactly how much it went through. It actually didn't even go further than the thickness of the seal. I believe that's a 3/8 thick seal right there. And I will be replacing it, so no problem about this seal. And I'm just going to dump that right in there. I got the bracket on the left side off. I drained all the oil and the seal is removed. Now I have to take off this bracket. Even though I loosened both nuts, it's still really tight on there because this is going through dirt all the time and dust gets here. So I'm going to have to try and pry this off and do the best just to get it off so I can clean everything and the housing around it. I just finished cleaning up the housing of the gearbox. Everything looks really good. Now I can install the studs, and what I'm going to do before I install them is add some UTV sealant around the thread and then thread them in so the oil inside the gearbox will not leak. Next up, I'm going to be installing the seal, so let's get to that. Next up is the main seal right here, which holds in most of the oil. And the step that I'm going to take to install the new seal is to make sure both surfaces are undamaged and they are clean before assembly. So what I'm going to be doing right now is actually buffing out or cleaning up the area where the seal was riding on. So the reason I'm going to be doing that is this seal is right here. I have the old seal, and as you guys can see, the first lip is held in place by a spring right here. So this spring right here is around the lip, and what that does is actually it holds tension on this rubber lip seal right here around the shaft, and it gives it a certain tension so that lip holds on the shaft and doesn't let any oil past. Over time, when this is running at very high speeds, it is possible that this shaft will get worn out. Now, the thing is, when you put a new seal onto the shaft after you take this one out, you can't just put it back on without doing any changes or modification to the shaft if it has a groove somewhere. So the best way to change that would be to get a seal that's thinner, and or if there's enough room in your housing right here, then you can push the seal to a different distance so you can offset it a little bit further back or a little bit further forward, so that groove where that lip was seated is not going to dig into the same position of the shaft, giving you a proper seal. To fix that, this spring will add a certain amount of tension so that seal will still compress a little bit even if there would be a groove. So another possibility is to just lightly buff it out with some really fine emery cloth, and that's what I'm going to do for my instance right now. There's a little groove in it, and what I'm going to try to do is when I install the new seal, I'm just going to tap it in a little bit further than it was before, but making sure that I don't touch anything in the back like the bearing, the washer, or in my case right here, the most forward part. Closest to the seal will be the snap ring. So I'm going to have to take a precaution not to tap it in too far, but also make sure that it's not sitting in the same little groove. So without further ado, let me get that done.